This week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast.
How dare you talk about a game you haven't played forever?
Oh!
If you try to fight them, I will kill you.
Big square grid, pushed all the competition out, everyone adopted it.
I love this hobby, it's so stupid.
MCDM's new RPG that is currently in the works called Crows.
I love this question.
Also, James, hey, it's too late. You're not getting a job back.
All that and more right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the most incidental tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms, because we happen to be here, so we're going to do an episode. My name is Ben Byrne, and I am joined, as always, by Shawn Merwin, Todd Kenrick, and Dael Kingsmill. And Dael, I'm going to start with you. What non-D&D tabletop role-playing game do you play or have you played regularly?
I would say the non-D&D game that I've played several, but I'm trying to reach beyond Pathfinder because,
Sure.
It's another D20 fantasy, although I have played plenty of Pathfinder, got that under my belt. I would say maybe Fate. I'm trying to think, what answers will Shawn give that I can steal before he gets a turn? No, I've played a decent number of sessions of Dread, although they tend to be one-shots, so not
Sure.
campaigns so much. But yeah, I frequently come back to Fate, and I come back to Kids on Bikes, probably.
Okay, fair. Todd Kenrick, how many more of Shawn's answers are you going to steal?
Oh, fantastic. I confess I still own West End Star Wars because of the elegance of the D6 system. But I'm actively playing and learning Daggerheart right now. I'm about to start a game for my wife, Megan, like a one-on-one game.
Nice.
Just because I want to learn every kind of section of that, and I'm going to start playing for finding dungeon masters for that particular game. In history or right now? Because that's a long list if it's history. I want to learn. I want to play Kids on Bikes. I love the conceit of that. And I own Dishonored, the role-playing game, as well, because I'm just a massive Dishonored fan. And sometimes I just like to read role-playing books as lore drops and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah. I played Amber. Amber Diceless system was kind of fun at the time. I enjoyed the simplicity. Cyberpunk, I bought the red edition.
Have you played Cyberpunk?
No, I haven't, because I have to find someone.
Shawn Merwin, what about yourself? What are games that you have played regularly throughout your...
Regularly, I would have to go back a long way for regularly. Top Secret was a big one back in the day. I did play a couple of campaigns with Fate, as Dael said. Few shot 2D20 game, Star Trek. And then I played a little bit of Daggerheart and a little bit of Draw Steel recently, so that's where I stand. But I wouldn't say more than 3 or 4 games in the campaign within the last couple of years, because lots of stuff happening.
Indeed, there is, always. Lots of things competing for time. And that brings us into a listener email that we received last week. Todd, what's the email address if people want to email this podcast?
It's podcast@ghostfire.com.
Oh, so close. It is podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Don't send it to the other podcast.
I mean, you could if you wanted.
Emails to the other podcast.
Probably won't be read.
Wow, I failed.
Craig emailed and asked a question, to be honest, that we get a lot and sometimes not always asked very politely, but Craig did ask politely. So I thought, you know what, let's actually address this. And it's, why does the Eldritch Lorecast seemingly focus only on Dungeons & Dragons, Daggerheart, and to some extent Draw Steel as kind of the main games that we report upon? There's a host of reasons that I have here, but the one that I kind of wanted to highlight with the opening question was the fact that tabletop role-playing games individually kind of have a bit of a high barrier to entry on any individual game, right? There's half a textbook often in front of people, and while you don't need to learn the entirety of those rules to start playing very often, you still need a group. You need 2 to 3 other players. You need the time. You need to decide to play a new game as opposed to all the other games that you want to play. And so speaking for myself, it's just challenging to have a really deep knowledge of the RPG industry outside of the immediacy of kind of what's happening in the broader strokes, because it's really hard to kind of break in and feel like you can have an informed opinion about the widest breadth of role-playing games. Does that sound fair to you folks? Is that reasonable to say?
Yeah, this also sounds fair in the sense that, like, you know, why doesn't Vanity Fair cover the cast of Castlevania compared to, say,
Sure.
Mighty Nine, right? Like, we can go real deep on all of this. It's that, also, this is not extremely easily consumable media. We're not watching a 20-minute cartoon or an hour long even. We're talking about an entire book that you need to absorb and understand, like, what's going on with it, with Kickstarter. And these are all companies that also don't necessarily have marketing that's being shot at people on YouTube, people on Twitch, people like us. Like, that's they're having to spin so many plates at the same time, and then places, other bigger tabletop games have like larger media empires basically, or they have, you know, influencer managers and all this other stuff. There's a billion reasons why that happens, and none of it's nefarious. It's just we're human beings that can only cover so much, and that's just how it is usually.
And if you do try to cover something that you're not really, really an expert in, you will hear about it. Teos and I on Mastering Dungeons have covered games that we don't play a lot. We've read, we maybe have played once or twice. And as soon as we say one thing wrong, we are getting bombarded with, why do you hate this game? How dare you talk about a game you haven't played forever? And so it's not beneficial for anyone in the long run, unless you do know what you're talking about very, very acutely.
The old catch-22, because we are in an interesting position, right? Because we are both at the same time, we are absorbing and sort of reacting to content or products or whatever that exists within this space, but we are also creating our own product in the form of this podcast. And so we also have to deal with the finding common ground with the stuff that we absorb and the people who are watching our stuff or listening to our stuff while they, you know, wash their dishes while they're driving their cars. And so that adds another layer to it where you're kind of narrowing down all the time. And it just becomes a really tricky thing. And of course, as Shawn said, we know that there have been times that we have stepped in to talk about Pathfinder.
Oh,
it went poorly.
It did. I mean, also on the news side of things, touching on what Todd said a moment ago, I think that the tabletop industry, it's not great at getting news out there. There are some really great websites like EN World I use a lot. Dicebreaker I used to, but they're not really around anymore. Wargamer.com, something like that, are pretty good. There's a handful of good websites. A lot of them don't have news articles every single week because often the RPG industry, the news boils down to just someone's releasing a Kickstarter, someone's putting a product. Like there's Pathfinder news at the moment that they've announced what their books are coming along this year. And it's kind of like, I try to avoid the episode when picking topics becoming just a catalog of like, yeah, you could look at this and you could look at that and you could look over here. And so tend to try to, if we're talking about products, it's, you know, even D&D books, we might look at previews, but we don't tend to recover them when the book actually releases because it's just, you go get it if you want it. You know, we're not Wizards' marketing arm. They've got very good marketing of their own. And so we tend to either focus on stuff that, like, if it's a product release, it's noteworthy for another reason. Ideally, whether it's an incredibly large Kickstarter in the case of a lot of the Draw Steel ones, or Cosmere even, or it's we think it's gonna change the industry in some different way, or it's got some other kind of implication to it, which can lead to a lot of, admittedly, like indie games getting left on the wayside a little bit. Because as we've touched on, we don't have time to really engage with that game to have an informed opinion about the game itself. And there's not much point just saying like, yeah, I mean, I don't know, this is a thing. Check it out.
Yeah, and we're also terribly separated. Like when you look at really successful Kickstarters, like, well, I mean, Matt Colville is the voice of, you know, Draw Steel, right? They got a huge YouTube channel. They get tons and tons of views, and they're directing directly at their main audience, which is already following them. Same thing for Legends of Vantress. Crooked Moon is a fantastic product, and they've already got their built-in fan base. It's massive on YouTube, especially. And then, Dungeons of Drakenheim with the Dungeon Dudes, exactly the same thing. So it's hard. I wish there was more bandwidth to cover everything. But it's, it's getting covered.
Yeah.
Also, there's...
Yeah, I mean, there's also, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds about it, but there's such fine nuance to the conversation about nichedom, right? Particularly when you are creating content like a podcast. I feel like I touched on it briefly last week, probably not very well, and I think I talked about it in the comments as well, where it's in order to find a sweet space, in order to start developing a community of your own, you're trying to walk the line between throwing an extremely wide, broad but skinny net of here, let's talk about literally everything, but then it makes it harder for people to find your stuff because people are usually searching for something much more specific. But if you go too niche, then the audience is really small, right? And even if we talk about kids on bikes or whatever, the audience for that is already small. But we're also talking to a particular band of that audience. We are niched within that niche, right? Because we tend to be talking to game masters more than we talk to players, more than we talk to people who watch actual play content. We have a niche within the niche. And so the smaller the niche gets, the harder it is to pinpoint that stuff. That doesn't control what you talk about, but it does play a role when you're considering what's the headline news of this week.
Absolutely. I mean, what are people searching? What do people want to know about? And often with podcasts, I know, speaking for myself, when you hear a piece of news, you think, wow, I'm going to look forward to listening to the podcast this week, whatever, whether it's a video game podcast, a tabletop podcast, a boat and fishing podcast, because I like these people that I hang out with. I want to hear their take on it. And so we're trying to, and we don't always hit the mark, but trying to find where are those topics that are, broadly appealing and engaging the cultural zeitgeist in a way that is going to serve as much of the audience as we can. And we tend to strictly do hour-long podcasts. We're not the folk doing the 2-3 hour long kind of massive conversations. We like to keep it a tight 60, so to speak. Usually 63 or 58 or 56 or 60, 72. Who knows how many minutes, but somewhere in there.
You also don't always get the choice. I don't have the choice. I'll be completely transparent. When I got laid off, I have a large Dungeons and Dragons audience, but suddenly I had a large Daggerheart. It's Daggerheart. It's a Skyrim. No, it's a Norwegian game.
Daggerheart was my favorite movie when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's a lot like Dragonheart, but way darker. So I suddenly grew this large Daggerheart audience because of I'm friends with Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford, and I've interviewed the Kirk Rolecast a couple of times, and all of a sudden I got that association. So my audience is primarily those two things, not much else really, other than my hot takes on stuff between those two systems. So that's why I tend to focus on the most. That's the nature of being a YouTuber.
Yeah, YouTube does tend to niche you in a way that's not always intentional, suddenly, Dael is a great example of wasn't a D&D YouTuber and then had a couple of breakthrough videos. I don't mean to speak for you, Dael,
no,
but
right.
it seems if I want people to keep coming and finding my channel because they're bouncing off the mythology videos, comparatively speaking, I know a couple of YouTubers
or
who are a little bit...
reached my saturation point, I think.
Totally.
With that content, yeah.
And the algorithm is based off your subscribers already on your YouTube channel. So if they are served something on your YouTube channel, your already existing subscribers, and they don't like it, the algorithm will think that no one cares about it, which is wild because I did a reaction video to the Doomsday trailer because I'm a fan of Doomsday. I don't know about the movie coming out, but I'm a fan. I was excited to see something. No one cared because my subscribers did not care.
Yeah.
We don't care about what you think about the Doomsday trailer. I have a lot of Marvel and DC knowledge, and no one's on my channel is interested. I'd have to make a new channel.
Yeah, exactly. And then my last thing I wanted to mention here, and it's not that I feel the need to defend ourselves in any way on this. As I've said, a lot of folks ask this question in a not very kind way. But given the tone of Craig's email, which was, quite genuine, I think we do try to cover a wide breadth of games in different ways. We had a whole topic on Jabenture a couple of weeks ago, trying to shine a light on that form of predominantly Chinese role-playing that I thought was really interesting. When those kind of topics come up, we try to cover them. And I think other role-playing games also come up a lot in the listener emails. A lot of what speaking for myself, a lot of what I speak about does tend to target towards 5e because that's the game I have the most experience in being able to answer audience questions in an informed way. But I know Shawn in particular is really good at bringing up like other role-playing games that might serve the question in a better way. So, other games do tend to crop up in conversations around listener questions there.
It's also,
I also put on my journalistic hat right now. This is Ghostfire Gaming. And you are covering all these other games that you have no partnerships with on a regular basis, and that you don't have an existing relationship that behooves you for we're going to support our partners. You're not doing any of that. How many companies would Disney interview? Netflix? You could look at a lot of other companies in the tabletop space. They're not going to interview the competition or talk about it. This is it's shockingly journalistic, right? For a company to put that on is wild, and I'm all for it. It's fantastic. So I think we're way ahead of the curve in terms of that, in terms of content. So
it's also worth noting that, and this is such a small sample size, and it has nothing to do with Craig, who very politely worded this question, but Absolutely. I have done whole videos on my channel in the past that did really well, that were me saying, here's a bunch of non-D&D games that I love. And I just went through every physical copy game I had and every digital copy that I had on that computer, more or less. And it wasn't every game I've ever played, but it was a lot of games. I went through so many. And there were still people in the comments saying, oh, so basically just variations on D&D. Sometimes you just gotta talk about what you want to talk about. And the garden will curate itself.
The garden will curate itself.
I think that's a awesome variation on two different things that my mum used to say, and my brain has mixed them together, and now I don't remember either, and I've come up with something that doesn't make sense.
Fair enough. Well, with the thumbnail and title of this week's episode ticked off, it'll probably be something about why we only talk about D&D. We do have only one tiny piece of news, and it comes from one of our favorite game creators, MCDM. But we're not talking Draw Steel strictly, because James Indracaso is no longer the lead designer for Draw Steel, and instead has moved positions to game director of MCDM's new RPG that is currently in the works, completely different from Draw Steel, called Crows. I'll admit, I don't know a lot about Crows at the moment, and when folks in the Ghostfire office have seen this on the run sheet, they were like, oh, what's Crows? And I'm like, I'm not actually all that certain. Dael, I don't know if you have any more information about Crows.
Look, here I am. I'm going to get it all wrong because I haven't talked about Crows in a long time, but it's something they've been talking about for ages that they want to work on, that I believe Crows is. Someone in chat's going to correct me. I believe Crows is their more sort of rogue-themed dungeon crawly game. I believe. I'm waiting for someone to tell me if I'm right or wrong, but it's one of. Oh, can Shawn tell me if I'm right or wrong?
I playtested this at GameholeCon.
What?
It's true. And what Dael said is absolutely correct. It is a sort of lighter form Draw Steel. It works with the same sort of dice system. So you're rolling 2d10. You are doing
powered by Draw Steel.
There you go. But it is much quicker, much more deadly. And when James ran it, they don't have any NDAs. And so I feel like I'm free to talk about this. When James ran it. And exactly. It used a system of inventory where you put your inventory in certain slots, and rather than just dying from hit point loss, you lose access to certain bits of equipment as you become less and less vigorous and able to carry things. So you start moving slots around to make sure that you don't lose the equipment that's most valuable to you. It was really, really fun to play, really exciting. I played a character that somehow survived against all odds, and at the very end got blown up in a spectacular way by one of my allies.
I love that.
It was hilarious and fun and still in development, but I trust James to make great games. They've made one great game already with Draw Steel, and I see this one as being very popular for the dungeon delvey, as Dael said, rogue style,
sure,
more quick play, I'll call it.
Okay. Would you describe this as kind of like Crows is to Draw Steel what Shadow Dark is to 5e a little bit?
A bit. I would say Crows is maybe a little bit more meaty than Shadow Dark. Okay. And I don't mean that as a judgment on Shadow Dark. There's just more to it, I think. There's more to Crows than there is to Shadow Dark in terms of at least what the final product will be. Maybe they'll pare it back, but there's a little bit more heft to it, I think.
I really like the idea of powered by Draw Steel that Dael said, because I went on I go on this rant all the time, so if I've already done it on this show, I miss basic D&D for the ability to like draw in new audiences, and eventually basic D&D died away because it was a very casual audience, and that casual audience has the tendency to go away as well. So you can adopt people very quickly, but it was very simplified D&D rules to try to bring in younger audiences, and a lot of great things came out of that. Like that's the first place you were able to play goblins and hobgoblins and all these other things. They had all these really kind of out there supplements for it when it was coming out. Sadly, it went away, but like I would like to see something like that that's like powered by D&D or powered by Daggerheart, and even a simpler version.
Sure.
For people to like just jump in and get it and understand it.
I mean, that's what I appreciate about, the OGL still existing, but also, Draw Steel having powered by Draw Steel, or, Chaosium have their own, I think it's the universal role-playing game system or something like that. Because what it does for folks, and I'm going to speak 5e specifically, but it's a shared language where the barrier, like I've talked a few times about wanting to try Shadow Dark. We almost started a Shadow Dark campaign in my home game recently, but just went a different direction because I've been told that it is very close to 5e. It shares a lot of the same DNA, but it's very stripped back, right? And then, different other things added into it to give it its own identity. But that makes the barrier to entry feel so much lower because I already kind of speak the language. I'm just learning a different dialect, if that is a fair comparison, Yeah. And so I agree, Todd. I really appreciate these kind of dialects or game engines, maybe if that's an appropriate word to use, that then you can branch out of, so that, look, you may only be a fan of one game engine, but there's various styles of games that you can play within that engine, which I think 5e is kind of getting close to at the moment, between like Shadow Dark and Tales of the Valiant and Nimble and Advanced 5e, and even, if you pull in Grim Hollow supplements or whatever, you can really change what that core thing is by the different game that you draw into it.
Yeah. And I think it's where you start to see some really exciting design work. Because, as much as MCDM with Draw Steel did do what they wanted to do and weren't going to sort of bend what they wanted to make everyone happy, I think you get much more of that once you go, okay, yeah. There's the base system, fantasy, go, great for everyone. Everyone's happy, great. Now I'm going to make my weird little dark game that's just for these freaks in this corner. And you can start doing weird stuff with it, which often makes for a very sort of concentrated thematic experience, which I love personally.
And I hope, like, in the digital age, that stuff is less scary. Like with MCDM's recent Kickstarter, like, yeah, you get, because it seems like a lot of things seem to start with a generic fantasy thing, but like back in like D&D's heyday, there are a lot of different fantasy settings for D&D that has the perception that they did really well. They did not. Ravenloft was always beloved, but I'm gonna say between Dragonlance and Ravenloft, the other ones were super niche when it came to sales, and we all felt it. Even when you went to the comic book shop, you would see certain settings, and they just sit there gathering dust, and you'd buy them to read them, but you wouldn't necessarily run them. And there were a lot more than everyone thinks. Hopefully now that we have like Kickstarter is enabling way more stuff, I think we're actually in the golden age of third-party content for systems like D&D and other systems, because Ghostfire is filling a niche. Legends of Vantress are filling niches. MCDM is doing their own thing, but they're already going after a very different feeling. And I think we're kind of almost spoiled right now for the variety of third-party content we can get and the completely specific settings. When you look at Drakenheim, which is like, do you like kind of magical radiation and tentacles and a city that's been destroyed? I'm like, I've always loved that. Like, we can like super hyper target audiences now, and that just wasn't remotely possible like 20 years ago.
And the production value on those things is off the charts. You could get stuff back in the day that was a little off, and it would look like somebody mimeographed it and put it up on the shelf, right?
It's someone's personal zine.
Right, exactly. And now the books that you're getting rival the art and the layout and that presentation that Wizards of the Coast has with their books, which is already top-notch stuff.
Well, speaking of top-notch stuff, Dwayne emailed podcast@ghostfiregaming.com to ask a top-notch question, which related to the conversation we were having last week about decreasing mental load of running tabletop RPGs. Dwayne has a bit of an issue where they tend to get migraines for 2 or 3 days, even after just running a one-shot, making the mental load kind of a considerable barrier. And I know I've got a mate who, it's not running D&D, but he gets a similar thing where he starts to get a migraine if we're playing a war game for too long, because it's just the intensity of concentration. So do we have any advice for Dwayne and other folks in terms of like trying to lower that mental load for running games so that it is less of a barrier?
So I had to run a live play show for 3 or 4 years every single Wednesday and without break. So yeah, I have thoughts. Drink a lot of water.
Okay.
I tend to need to completely decompress afterwards and not talk to anyone. It's a lot of social interaction. Your brain is literally cooking, but like take a shower, cold shower or a bath. Like I don't know how to help. Like prepping is great, but like if you're improvising a lot, which you very well should be, your brain is going to be cooking. It just is. Actually, the more healthy you can actually be, both physically and mentally, the better of a dungeon master you'll be. This is a wild thing to say, but like you are maxing out your CPU when you're a dungeon master. You are absorbing 4 to 6 people's fantasy, and they're giving you feedback live. You're reading people's faces. You're adapting to what they're doing. You're trying to give all of your friends a good time. You're never going to be more maxed out than that unless it's your wedding day. Like, it's never going to happen. So, like, it's a lot. Like, I don't think there's, like, any one thing, but, like, health is a weird thing to bring up. You can certainly do tons of prep, but I don't think that's necessarily going to keep that feeling from happening. The dungeon masters who are professionals, who run games for like, maybe it's Start Playing or D&D and Castle, they may be running the same adventure that over and over, even 100 times. And so there's no load as much because they know that story backwards and forwards. And there's different limitations. So everything I said was not helpful.
No, it's actually very, very helpful because I came from the world of organized play where you would go to Gen Con and you would run a game from 8 to noon, from 1 to 5, and then from 6 to 10. So you'd run 3-4 hour adventures, and it might be different adventures. It might be the same. And so really what you have to do is you just have, through repetition, learn what those touch points are that trigger you. if it's doing a lot of math, you might want to give the math to a player to do. If keeping track of initiative is an issue, ask someone else to keep initiative. Do those things, offload those things that are the most stressful for you, and focus then on the things that either give you a break or give you so much joy that it's a joy to do rather than a burden.
Sure.
Yeah, that's really smart.
Yeah.
I think also just a quick element of what Todd was touching on is like aftercare for yourself. Like I often, if I finish a game, sometimes you come off a game that you've just run with a little bit of adrenaline of like, oh my God, I can't wait for the next session. Now I'm going to start prepping it like this, that evening or that next morning or whatever, which is fine to do. But if you're feeling like, I have that motivation, but I feel tired, I love nothing more than curling up with the Steam Deck or a PS5 after running a tabletop role-playing game, because that's my chill out kind of like, I do it just for me. It doesn't feel like homework in any way whatsoever, which D&D prep can kind of a little bit. I'm not sitting at a desk. I'm kind of, sitting back on the couch. I'm just like, take a bath, put on some relaxing music, watch a movie or a TV show, like that level of aftercare of letting yourself kind of just unplug and disengage a little bit rather than just diving straight into prep for the next session, so to speak. And then just something quickly, sorry, Dael, that Shawn mentioned was
you've done this.
The only times I tend to feel physically ill after running games is at cons. Or like public spaces. I can get a headache after running tabletop RPGs. I think that's because like the physical workout you get is bigger because you have to project more. You might have to stand up a lot more and walk around, and you're trying to really entertain people as opposed to your home game where it's a much more relaxed environment and you can sit down. And if you find running games is a bit of a physical drag on you, is just like trying to create an environment where, maybe the music is turned right down so you don't have to project to be heard or say like we're playing between here and here and, for this hour we're playing, if I can have everybody's kind of like undivided attention, that would be awesome. And then we'll take a break and we can chit chat and stuff. So you don't feel like you're having to talk over the table talk or anything like that. Anyway, Dael, what were you going to say?
I was going to basically touch back on all those things that you've all talked about. I just think, as much as I'm one of those people who hates it. I hate physically looking after myself. Oh, what a drag. But it does make a difference. And if you are getting migraines for days, you have to look after yourself. You have to drink water. You have to take the migraine tablets. You have to try to get sleep. And it can be so hard. I hate drinking water. I'm one of those people. It tastes gross to me. I've started doing the fruit, the edge of fruit water because it makes me drink more water. Find the thing that will make you do it more. And even like fluids is better than no fluids. If you're going to drink juice instead of water, at least you're drinking fluids. You know what I mean? Also, it'll save you from the kidney stones. They hurt. Don't do it. But, all those sorts of things. We've got Tia Toulon in chat who's bringing up really good advice in terms of sharing the load, which is what Shawn was talking about as well, is when you're setting up a board game and you're just handing, you shuffle those cards, you set this up, because it just makes it easier. It makes it take less time. It's less of a burden on you. And that can be hard to do as well. But just try it. Just try it. Just try little things. Just, hey, you set this thing up. Hey, you track HP. It makes a world of difference. And also, a mysterious stranger has arrived in chat named James Hake, who suggests strip it down to basics. Make the game simpler. Don't DJ music if you don't have to. Ask players to track monster HP for you. Delete tasks entirely or offload them to friends, which I think feeds into my bit of advice, which is probably get good with being imperfect. That's hard as well, but you don't have to do all those things that you see the coolest dungeon master on the internet doing. You don't have to do all those cool things that you read on Reddit and they sound like a great idea and you would love to have them in your game. If you are physically exhausting yourself like that, just get good with not having everything down and making mistakes and having to correct yourself, and all of those little things just takes a lot of the pressure off for that. And then I do also think that I don't know about physically in terms of aftercare, but I can get very emotionally like I can get really down on myself after running a game. And so I think that sort of taking care of yourself afterwards, for me, sometimes involves doing like stars and wishes without the wishes. You know, hey, everyone, let's just talk about the coolest things that happened in the game. Just so that I can like remember that there were highs. Let's just talk about the cool things that happened. And if we need to talk about things that we can correct and do better later on, we can do that later on. But right now, right after the game, let's focus on the positives.
Yeah, I'm very good at beating myself up after every single adventure, for sure. Also, James Hake, it's too late. It's frankly kind of freaking embarrassing. You're not getting a job back. So, sorry, man, you made your choice, and it was the wrong one.
Take that.
Wow.
Yep. I did run so I was running a 3-year-long Star Wars game. It was West End Star Wars, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it got a little out of control sized. And then it was the holidays, and everyone was in town and wanted to play, and it was 15 people. We had 2 long tables between 2 rooms, and we're all playing Star Wars. And it was the Battle of Endor, but on the other side of the moon, there was a Star Destroyer, and there were people on the ground. So we had like a group that was with one of the Jedi, and they were doing their thing. We had a group that was in Starship Combat, and we had another group that was a bunch of scoundrels, and they're all part of the same group, but in different sections of what was going on in our big finale. And I had 2 friends that were also game masters, and I just had them, hey, handle this combat. I'm handling this. And this other person handled this role-playing interaction because they had played with me. The players had played with me for so many years. They knew the NPCs. They knew what to expect, and we're just trying to have a good time. And it worked amazingly. Like, they would just like yell at me from across the hall, hey, this thing happened. It was almost like running an epic. Only like a little bit more complex and more immediate. We had the best time. It was like an 8-hour session.
Incredible.
Everyone still talks about it. They call it the Christmas episode, and the fact that it is not a bad Star Wars Christmas episode. But it was an insane time, and everyone still talks about it. It was a great time.
I love that.
Let your players do work for you. They will be actively happy to do so.
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to try?
Get them talking.
I don't know why I've never thought of this before, because I love having music in my game to set the mood and all these things, and probably I haven't thought of it before because I'm such a control freak. But I have a player who loves curating playlists. Why am I not handing over music control to them so that I don't have to worry about it? Like, come on, Dael.
I agree. I think I might do the same. I tend to be a bit of a control freak with the music as well, because I'm like, oh no, I want to set a very specific mood and atmosphere, but handing that off might be a good idea. The one other bit of advice, and I hope this doesn't come off as a cop-out, but just if you are in a situation where like you get migraines from playing tabletop role-playing games, something you might want to try is potentially looking at board games that could scratch a similar itch. I'm thinking, speaking of Star Wars, Imperial Assault or Descent, Journeys in the Dark, or even like Zombicide or Gloomhaven, where you have a party, it's kind of fantasy themed, there's a story being told, even though it's a bit more emergent out of the game as it's happening, but there's far less of that mental load. You don't need to prep anything. You can just crack open the game and start playing, even if you're playing the GM role in Descent or Imperial Assault, and you have your cards there that if you need to remember something, the card's going to remind you most of the time, right? You have your options in front of you, and I find often playing a board game can scratch a similar itch of like that socialization and engaging with some game rules with much less of that stress or mental load or need to prep anything, I find it a lot more relaxing in some ways. So
yeah, if you just want to go on a fantasy adventure with your friends, there are less stressful ways to do it, I suppose, if it's taking a toll on your body. And also, I mean, like the internet, the old ancient internet adage says, no D&D is better than bad D&D. And bad D&D can encompass D&D that is breaking your body.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's an addictive side too, because you brought up video games. I will watch movie trailers over and over again after I play a game, after I'm done running a game, because I use movie trailers for inspiration. I can't enjoy TV or film. Like, none of that's going to like make me relax because I'm going to think of more plot lines while I'm watching a TV or a film. I'm going to create pluribus for D&D. Like, I'm just eventually going to do it. But if I'm playing Mario Kart, still a danger of me making a Mario Kart encounter.
I've got my notes on the Mario Kart RPG on my phone right now.
But at least there's like a little bit of a disconnect. Like, it's hard to like think about D&D while you're playing skee ball at a local arcade. Like, find something that forces you to divorce yourself from that part of your brain that is having to work. You need to give it a break. It's like a muscle. Don't keep running. Don't go jogging after a marathon.
I love that.
Well, speaking of marathons and jogging, let's take a quicker question that'll be a bit more like a jog than a marathon from Mr. Capazzo, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, emailed and asked what I think is a pretty simple question, but an interesting one. Why no hex grid? Why do hex grids get way less attention than square grids for tactical combat? Hex seems far more practical for movement, spell effects, distances, placement, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to do the thing where you double count diagonals, for example. Why are hex grids just not as popular, seemingly, as
and
square
you know
grids?
What? You know what? You're so correct. Because hexes because you know, it feels like this ongoing battle between the people who are saying, oh, but it should be more simulationist, it needs to be accurate, and if you're moving on the diagonal, it's not the same amount of movement as if you're moving up, down, or side to side. And they're right, technically. And then there's the people who say it doesn't matter, it's non-Euclidean, just do whatever you want, and that's also fine. But then hexes exist to just make it a peaceful ground for both kinds of people, but instead of using them, we don't use them. And you know why? The actual reason is because I got down to the bottom of this. I think this is maybe the most viewed short on the MCDM YouTube channel, is when I interrogated James Introcaso about why they weren't doing hex grids. And it's actually, at least in their case, just because most of the pre-existing map makers online use a square grid. And so there's just not as many pretty maps that are already pre-made for you to use that are using hex grids.
Well, along those lines, because I did want to swap to using a hex grid early when I was running D&D, it made more sense to me, and distances and all that reasons that were just outlined. But there's no really easily available retail board that has hexes on it. I know there's a few, like I don't want to say there's none, but they're far less accessible. The official like D&D Wizards of the Coast board, which I actually really love for its ease of use and its size, they're squares on both sides. I think there's a Pathfinder one that's like dry erase, but it just seems to get stained really, really easily. That's not a call out to Pathfinder. It might not be Pathfinder official, I'm not sure. But yeah, hex grids as a gaming aid don't seem as readily available in game stores as square grids as well.
This is a lot of Paul's stuff. It's big square grids, the industry. Because you know what? You may not remember this. It used to be all hex grids. I have a map of Talidus still from Dragonlance, if you want, and that was hex grids. But big square grid pushed all the competition out. Everyone adopted it, and now everything and all the VTTs are in on this too. Like it's sure. The conspiracy runs real deep.
Goes all the way to the top.
They're also responsible for the Stranger Things finale and the combat in there because of square grids. So, yeah.
There you go.
I was actually doing some design this weekend, and I brought a hex grid out for reasons. And I first realized no minis that are out there are going to fit well, right? If you have a medium size, they fit nicely into little hex. But if you go to large, it doesn't quite fit in 6. But if you go to the huge, it fits in the 1 and then every ring around it. So it's like, oh, we'd have to redesign all the monsters, redesign all minis. Then I started thinking about 3 dimensions, and if you're playing in 3 dimensions, you're not going to have a level. You're going to have levels in between, if that makes sense. Because now we're thinking in 3 dimensions instead of 2. So you wouldn't be able to have, you're on what level 1, you're on level 2. It's level 1, level 1A, level 2, because they don't fit perfectly.
As if the three dimensions are really working on the square grid anyway.
Well, that is true. That is true. And so what we need is a game designed specifically for the grid, because then you would get all your spell elements right, all of your spheres. Well, the spheres work fine, but now you're working with cones. And how's a cone work? Well, how does a line work? If you do a line and it's just that one line, that's not going to hit as much as you have to start doing all of this other figuring. And I think it would be great if a game did it, and I'm sure there are games out there that do it, but it would have to unshackle itself from big grid.
This is big grid propaganda. The hexes are perfect, and there's nothing wrong with that. I actually
the conspiracy is called grid squared. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I was just going to say, I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. Colville once said that the reason he doesn't like hexes is because buildings don't fit properly on the hex grid.
I agree.
And but I don't care. I don't care.
There's so much like unused space because you're cutting hexes in half for a straight wall. Real buildings are all built according to squares anyway. Real buildings aren't built like that. You've been brainwashed. Yeah, okay, maybe. But look, there are issues with hexes. As someone who has played a lot of Warhammer Underworlds, which uses a hex grid, there are some like kind of awkward things with hex grids as well. For example, when you're like, okay, how far am I from this opponent who, I can draw a straight line between me and them, but to move to them, I kind of got to do like a crooked, like back and forth zigzag kind of pattern because the hexes are actually kind of just off center to each other in a weird way when your opponent or your target is off at a certain angle, if that makes sense. Even moving like straight forward, if the point of your hex is in front of you and there's a line because there's 2 hexes in front of you and your opponent is like 5 hexes down, you kind of got to go, oh, I'm coming for you, back and forth to get down to them. Is this the
time that I admit that actually what I want is for us to move towards an era of like tabletop wargaming style tape measures?
I've thought of doing that exact thing.
I can't convince my players to, and so I've just grabbed onto the hex grid as the closest thing I will ever get.
Once D&D starts to feel like Warhammer, all your players will probably disengage. Like I've wanted to do that exact same thing.
Board game movement.
Yeah.
Todd probably knows this, but I want to check with you two. Do you realize that in AD&D, character speeds were in inches and not in feet?
God. Oh, really?
Well, I would assume so, because otherwise, how did we get to the? When I was reading the run sheet yesterday, and I was talking to my mum, and I was trying to explain what this problem was and my strong feelings, and she was being very polite and listening to me. But trying to explain that 1 inch is 5 feet, and then each square is,
That's interesting though from a tabletop gaming history standpoint, because I wonder if there's any branch in there that ties into the way that Games Workshop games typically do movement, which is all in inches. They don't even conceive feet or like actual distances on the tabletop. They just say, it's all in inches. You know what I mean? So like, having played a lot of D&D now, I kind of assume that 1 inch is 5 feet in those games as well. But that doesn't make a lot of sense because wait, what?
If you're inside, an inch meant one thing, a certain amount of distance. But if you're outside, it meant something else.
Oh,
I love this hobby. It's so stupid.
Those early Dungeon Master guides are just like a descent into madness.
Speaking of mental overload.
Oh my gosh, obsessed. But then also now we've got games that don't even mention inches. It's just 5 feet or 1 square. So big square, they've infiltrated the rule books.
Well, how's this?
That might be simpler for That might be simpler for new people. If it said that your speed is 30 squares, that might actually help some people.
When you're right, you're right.
Totally
but
true.
I'm still mad about it.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, and this confuses me a little bit because Telsorian are an American company, to my understanding. They do the Witcher role-playing game, and if I'm not mistaken and my memory is holding up, that game is in meters. And so to play that game on the grid, let's assume a square grid, you have to assume that every square is 3 meters, not 5 feet. And then suddenly 3 is not a round number anymore. So all your measurements kind of get thrown out a little bit in terms of like, wait, how big should I make this room based on the fact that it's 3 meters, not feet? Anyway, it's speaking of confusing measuring distances.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we had these kind of arguments between role-playing styles. It's very specific acting, like schools of thought in improv. Yeah.
Well, speaking of acting and improv and styles, Junderland Games is asking, how often do you incorporate alternate win conditions, i.e. objectives that will end a combat that does not just boil down to kill or be killed? In their email, Junderland Games kind of describes Shadow Dark and Dragonbane strongly encourage players to solve problems without combat, which kind of reminded me of like Call of Cthulhu. The adage is if you're in a combat, you've already lost in that game. While Daggerheart and D&D 5e are almost the opposite, in their words, where PC death is rare and therefore simply killing the enemy is usually the most expedient path to victory, even if there is an alternate win condition. You know, it's like, you need to get this magical MacGuffin and get out. It is quicker to just kill everyone in this room, and then you can take the magical MacGuffin than try to get it out of the room before you kill all the enemies. How do you create consequences for failure in both styles of game? How do you design scenarios or campaigns where combat isn't the only option? And can combat be more than a fight to the death?
I don't know that it's 100%
dramatic
up
delivery.
to the dungeon master to do that. I'm not name dropping, but I was in a celebrity game in LA in a very fancy place, and they were all shocked because they were just combat. We're going to do some combat, and that was kind of like where everyone's headspace was. And we were about to get into this fight with this group of like hobgoblins and other things, like a menagerie of monsters, and I convinced them to go kill the Xanathar. Instead of fighting us, I just made persuasion roll after persuasion roll, and through the RP of what I was telling them, which was all BS, and I was a trickery domain cleric at the time, I convinced them. Instead of getting into a fight with them, they decided to run off to basically a mission where we knew they were going to die. And that moved that entire adventure along so much quicker, because that could have been another 3 hours that night just trying to kill these. And so I think encourage your players to think outside the box. Yes, there may be, hey, there's a bunch of guards in this space, but it's kind of up to the players to like think outside the box and be like, oh, we could sneak in, or we could bribe a guard, or we could, persuade someone, or we could start a bonfire in the distance and have them all run out of the castle. Make sure that they know that it can be that kind of game up front. Because, yeah, you're right. If you're a hammer, all you see is nails. But so maybe give them examples like, maybe it's session 0. You're like, you really can solve things if you think outside the box. And any type of narrative you've seen in novels or film or television, we can absolutely run a game like that. It's not necessarily hey, here's option A, option B, option C, and that's all I'm going to allow you to do. You certainly can do that, but that gets pretty boring as well. Just make sure they know that you're open to different solutions, I guess.
And if you're the game master, think through what those alternative solutions might be, and not necessarily plan for them, but at least plan for them. Because I hear this advice all the time with all the talky heads going, have alternate win conditions in your game. And I'm like, yeah, you go ahead and you design some encounters and see how that works. Because so many times it does turn into, well, you have to stop the ritual. And people are like, okay, stab. Ritual done. And so you really do need to think it through, and you do need to think of what those consequences might be. And if you put in consequences for stab, as opposed to focusing on the ritual, you will at some point get past the stab mindset, as Todd was talking about, and make them understand through consequences that isn't going to cut it this time. But what you really need to think about is the threat. What is the threat of the encounter that you're in? Because if the threat is goblins stabbing you in the face with spears, that is going to be what the players focus on.
Yeah.
So
sorry,
make it
keep
clear.
going.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
You unlocked a memory of probably one of the best video games ever made, and it's the first stealth game. And if you bring up Splinter Cell, so help me God, I was a video game journalist. Thief: The Dark Project is a game where it's one of the first. It is the first stealth game. You're running around, you're killing guards, all this stuff, and it all culminates to a moment where you have to steal an item from a god that is doing a ritual, and you don't fight the god. You take the main spell component of the ritual away, and it causes everything to go to crap. So the moment you said ritual, Shawn, the first thing I thought is give them a shitty diamond that has a crack in it, or the wrong candles, or like swap out the spell components and so it blows up in their face. Like, encourage them to like, it doesn't have to be stab, stab, stab. Maybe you intercept the things that they need and give them the wrong stuff. I don't know. You just have to maybe have that conversation and think of those alternate win conditions. But I think making sure the players, because when I first started playing D&D, the first session, I couldn't get my mind around the freedom.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's something you really have to break players of there's a lot of freedom here to be had.
Yes. And I think you have to, frankly, train them quite bluntly early on, because there are kind of two kinds of barriers that you face with this, right? The first is that the lingua franca of RPGs in general is D&D and combat, right? I saw someone talking about it on Blue Sky the other day. I can't remember. It might have been Cam Banks or Rob Donahue, a designer, talking about the thing that gives your players experience is going to be the thing that they chase, that they learn how to do. So if treasure gives them XP, they're going to be looking for treasure. They're going to be looting bodies. They're going to be scrounging for every bit of coin. If combat is the thing that gives them XP, they're going to go for that. And you can try to work around it a little bit. Like you can do milestone leveling in your D&D game, but if it is built for that to be the case, then that's going to be the thing that the rules kind of guide the players to do, no matter what. And then that lingua franca becomes this thing that gets dragged into other TTRPGs. The number of times, Kids on Bikes I brought up earlier, technically has a combat system, but it's really not built for you to be fighting things. Or Call of Cthulhu, you're not meant to really be fighting things, but your players still come into that TTRPG with that mindset of, I'm going to fight the things. And so you have to kind of overcome that particular sort of training that they already have gone through. And then the other layer is the specific individual encounter where, you can be like, oh, we're going to stop the ritual. But if killing the things is going to let them do that, that's what video games and RPGs and everything have kind of taught players to go for first. It's the hammer nail thing, like you said. And I think, frankly, even not just having that conversation at the beginning of the whole campaign, but when the encounter comes up and you say, the goal of this encounter is to X. The goal of this encounter is to steal that thing and get out. The goal of this encounter is to, I don't know, whatever, X, Y, Z, is to escape. Tell them, you're not trying to win a fight here. You are trying to escape. If you try to fight them, I will kill you. As DM, I can do that. Just being really blunt, at least the first handful of times. And once they've got a little bit of that training, you can start to be more subtle. You can start to just give them hints and they will start thinking of other things. But the other thing that I think is really interesting about it is that someone who doesn't have a background in all these video games or TTRPGs who's been trained into thinking this way. My mother, this is one of those episodes where I talk about my mom a lot. I ran D&D for my family at some point, and my mother just was so not interested in combat that she was like she solved the problem by the dudes at the end who were kind of, threatening them, and it was going to be this combat encounter. I think we did have a bit of a fight with the dragon, but she was just like, I'm going to use this spell in order to convince this guy to walk to the bottom of a frozen lake to get the dragon's treasure. And I was like, that's completely messed up. That's horrible. I'm going to let you roll for this. And it was delightful just watching a player who really didn't have those baked in expectations of what the game should be and seeing that freedom immediately,
I think if you want to encourage or design alternate win conditions, because what you're talking about, Dael, there, I think is very similar to what Todd mentioned earlier around like it's kind of a little bit up to the players if they're going to come up with their own bespoke solutions to a problem that's not combat or not violence. But if you want to bake alternate win conditions into your combat encounters, I think being very explicit about what that alternate win condition is important, because Solo Studios just mentions in chat in relation to the ritual, enemies keep spawning until the ritual is sabotaged. And the kind of endless spawn of enemies is a good way to make sure that just endless violence isn't the solution. But I've been in situations where if you haven't made the actual objective clear and enemies just keep spawning, often what the players will do is just turn around and engage in and just start killing those enemies. And if the end of the ritual is going to end in some world-ending event or functional TPK, and your players aren't getting that that's what they need to go and solve, then you can kind of get into an accidental death spiral where you're just layering enemies on top of them going, why aren't they getting this? You know, it's the same as a puzzle. Sometimes they're just not going to crack the puzzle. And if you design a puzzle with a time pressure that could really mess up the party, that can kind of trap you as the GM into a situation you didn't intend to put the party into. So, for example, just quickly, Shawn, rescue the hostages is one that I've done before, where you have the hostages on the game board and they're functionally objective tokens that the enemies can kill. And so the objective is still to kill all the enemies, and there are enemies that will spawn in you, but the players know they can get a higher score the more hostages they're able to rescue. And it's not a definitive either like pass fail, it's how many were you able to save before you manage to kill all the enemies, you know? Or I've done the ritual as well, where it's like, yeah, you could go around and kill all the cultists who are performing the ritual first, but there's a central cultist who is central to the ritual who keeps performing it until he is interrupted. If he succeeds in the ritual, that'll have its own consequence, but the party are kind of gauging between, okay, do we want to take out all the little guys first so then we just have to deal with the big guy? But the ritual's timed in a way where if they just ignore the big guy, he will complete the ritual before they've had time to get through all the chaff, so to speak. So you're creating a puzzle, but you're making it very clear to the players, he's the dude you have to stop. Fighting the little guys will try to get in your way, but killing them does not stop the ritual. So he's the dude you need to, kind of go after.
I would double down that. I would, every time you kill one of the cultists, their blood flies toward where ritual crystals in the center, and you're helping complete the ritual because they were going to sacrifice themselves anyways. So you're actually helping.
That happens in an episode of Buffy.
Yeah.
Everything happens.
You know what? There's this thing, one of my favorite games again, BioShock Infinite. Spoiler alert, there's an end encounter that is deeply frustrating. It was frustrating to me, and I was reviewing it, and I had to get it done in very short order. I don't have any review guides. It's me. I'm the one making the guide. And the final encounter was not to destroy all these patriots that are these robots, these very American robot patriots. It's to destroy this MacGuffin needs to be taken care of, and then you win the game. I'm just killing these things left and right, and they keep on showing up. And I'm like, why can't I win? And the same thing happened to my friend. Same thing happened to my wife, because the game had not taught you. Up until then, it was always destroy everything in your path, basically, or stealth past it. Not this scenario where all you can do is get to the MacGuffin and then you've won, because they had not taught you that. And when that happens in any video game or role-playing, that's just design. The players don't expect it. And then there's this, I wouldn't say super positive friction, because you didn't know. You didn't have the sense that, oh, okay, this is an unwinnable situation. You can put things like an adventuring party that has way better armor than you on pikes. So maybe you don't want to fight these folks, or give them several encounters where they do lose, where they're like, you're going to die. Sometimes you as a dungeon master, you have to be explicit too. I'm like, no, really, if you fight this, you will die. This is not your hero's journey right now.
You may think that people will clue into the infinite spawning, whatever. Hours
Hours.
We wrote a D&D open, and the table that was doing the best at a certain point got to go off and play at a special table. I think Chris Perkins was running it. And the whole point of this special encounter with Chris Perkins was, do not fight for one round and you win. There was one guard, and the guard says something like, something esoteric about violence not being the answer, blah, blah, blah. And so they killed, and it respawned as something higher CR. They killed that. It respawned. They got up to this creature. They were like 8th level characters, and they were fighting a Solar. Right. And at some point, Chris walked over to me and said, they just keep killing things. What do I do? And I'm like, have the guard say what the guard says and fight. Every round, the guard says this thing, and every round. And I think they even got to the point where, like, for one round, no one attacked, but then the last person just couldn't take it anymore. And they attacked, triggering right. And they did this for hours. Did not get it. So you can never be too clear. The last thing I wanted to add, I have the list, and we've actually covered everything on my list, except for if you do have the goal of an encounter being something other than fighting, make sure that the thing they're doing matches the epic level of where it is in the adventure. So if it's the final big boss battle and you have some sort of win alternative that's different, don't have it be one persuasion check and they're done, right? Have it be something where they have to work together. They have to do things that reach that peak of epic level for the encounter that they're in.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, the expectation is good. Look at the Lord of the Rings. If they told Frodo, you gotta go kill Sauron, and then he's like, this isn't working. What if we throw his ring in the fire? That would have been a weird ending. They set up from the get very early on. Okay, well, we're not going to kill Sauron. So
make the objective clear.
Yeah.
Yep.
Were you going to say something, Dael, at the end there?
Oh, not as, it didn't feel as final as Shawn's.
Speaking of ending things, or final things, or something like that, we are in the final moments of this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. We will be back next week, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific on a Monday, or if you're in Australia, it is 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Or you could catch us on YouTube and give us likes and thumbs and stars and stuff. Get us out to more folks to learn about the overly valuable information. I don't know. It's cool.
This is going
we like to hang
so
out.
well. This is really
Speaking
good.
of ending
things.
Yeah, you know what?
Time.
Speaking of respawning enemies,
Somebody else take over.
Final draft.
Yeah, Todd, the final test. You close out this episode of the podcast. I'm just going to drink some water.
I don't forget the proper thing to say, other than you should, if you want to email questions and really cool stuff, you should email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. I'm the big winner.
We'll be back next week with another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. I've been Ben Byrne, here with Todd Kenrick, Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, and we will catch you then.